Okay, so we're going to get started today. We're going to skip ahead to exercise 124, which isn't that bad. 123 is some basic SketchUp instruction. My guess is that all of you have opened and played with SketchUp before, so I'm not overly worried about it. If you haven't, don't panic. It's really easy to pick up on. But that's one of the things that we're going to cover in this class. So today you can still learn a fair amount about SketchUp without doing that first exercise. So we end up skipping 123. It's the nature of how the semester is going to play out. And today we're going to work with SketchUp. I'll cover the same stuff that I also covered in that in the 123 lecture, just so that you get a few of the little skills that I was talking about and working with. But what I want to focus on today is the idea that you have your AutoCAD drawing already made. How do you take that AutoCAD drawing and drop it into SketchUp and make it usable? And frequently people try to do that, and it ends up being more trouble than it's worth. So there's a few things that can really help you make that transition. So I'm going to walk through it. I have my original AutoCAD here. This is the file that I'm going to bring in. I'm not sure just yet, because we upgraded to AutoCAD 2019, whether the file types are going to be compatible. We may have to save this backwards. So I have that open in case that is the case. But I'm going to go ahead and open SketchUp 2018, which should match the version of SketchUp on your computers as well. It's up at the top of the screen there. And when that comes up, we are running on the school computer SketchUp Pro. SketchUp Pro gives us some extra options that the free SketchUp standard version doesn't give us. One of those options is the ability to bring in an AutoCAD file. So we are using a Pro feature today. I believe if you as a student want to get access to the Pro features, it's relatively inexpensive. So I'm going to go ahead and go down here to the third drawer, which is Template, and I'm going to use the Architectural Design feet and inches. The reason we want to be in feet and inches here is because we're matching up with what we worked in AutoCAD, which was in feet and inches. So we want to make sure that those two things match. I'll go ahead and start using SketchUp. If you chose one of the simple templates in feet and inches, it would still work because the units match. The difference is just the background colors are a little bit more plain in the Architectural Design feet and inches. I'm going to go ahead and click on Start Using SketchUp, and that will open up SketchUp. As I do with all the software when we first open it up for the first time, I want to walk through kind of what's going on in the world of SketchUp. When you first open SketchUp, you're seeing a 3D perspective view. The perspective view is fairly extreme. So you're going to get distortion around the edges, and I'll show you that in just a second. Across the top here are your standard basic tool set. For me, this is almost never enough from a tool set, and I usually go up into, let me see here, where is it? View, and then Toolbars, and I check the large tool set, which opens a tool set on the left side here that gives us a few more options. That's a personal preference. You don't have to do it, but for me, I tend to do that. Once again, it's under View and then Toolbars, and then I check the box for Large Tool Set, and then I'll go ahead and close. That just gives me a few more options over here on the left side. I'll talk through what these tools do in just a little bit. Our 3D workspace is obviously in the middle, and then over on the right are a bunch of what SketchUp calls trays. And we're going to work quite extensively today with the Layers tray, which I can expand, and also the Entity Info tray. So I'll leave both of those open for right now. But they work kind of like a V-Ray drawer where you can expand each one of these little trays out such that you can see information in one of those trays. We have our standard axes. We have an x-axis that is red, a y-axis that is green, and a z-axis that is blue. The opposite, the negative direction, are shown in dotted lines, and that gives us some sense of what's going on in this particular space. Since we haven't talked about SketchUp much yet, I want to point out a few things. But before I do, let me get rid of the little person, the figure that's here. I'm just going to click on her and press the Delete key on the keyboard to have her go away. If I was creating a shape in SketchUp, I'm going to use the basic rectangle tool, and this is review for a lot of you. If I click and hold, you can see that I'm dragging out a shape. And I should have had, hold on a second. I think the bottom of my window is hidden. There we go. When I'm creating a shape, you can see in the lower right corner here it has dimensions on it. And so right now this is 4 foot 7/8 inch by 5 foot 9. If I wanted to specify a specific value, while I'm still holding the mouse button down, I would just specify 4 feet. And you can see it types in that lower section, comma 4 feet. For example, if I wanted it to be at 4 feet by 4 feet. Now this is one of the things that I wanted to point out. If I move here to one of the edges and I do that same 4 feet by 4 feet, it's going to look like a rectangle, not an actual 4 foot by 4 foot square. That's the distortion that I'm talking about that happens in the view. They are both squares. They just appear distorted. So I like to point that out early on because people get thrown off by the fact that the edges don't look the same as what's happening in the center of a view. So I want to make these objects three-dimensional. I'm going to use the push-pull tool, which is right here. It looks like a little extrusion with an arrow pointing up. And that will allow me to pull up the shape. And I could say I want it to be 4 feet tall. There it is. Same thing with this shape. I want that to be 4 feet tall, like that. So again, I just want to emphasize the distortion on the edges of the SketchUp view here. OK, so I'm going to go ahead and delete those objects, and we'll get down to business with the AutoCAD file. When it comes to bringing in the AutoCAD file, a couple other things I should mention before I do that. The middle mouse button, the scroll wheel, if you hold that down, it will allow you to orbit. I will screw that up many times because Rhino is a right-click to orbit. And so my brain thinks right-click, but middle mouse to orbit in SketchUp. OK, so let's bring in that AutoCAD file. I'm going to go to the File menu, and I'm going to go to Import. And I'm going to go find that AutoCAD file. It's not there. It would be in this folder. Sorry. It's currently looking for 3D Studio files. I don't want that. I want an AutoCAD file, so I'm going to change the file type to AutoCAD. And there's my fall 2018 floor plan. I'm going to go ahead and click on Import. And it looks like it failed miserably, probably because it wasn't recognizing the file type. This is what I was afraid of. So I'm going to go back to AutoCAD, and I'm going to do a Save As. And we'll save it to the same place. And I'm going to say this is the 2013 I can't type this morning. And I'm going to go back to the AutoCAD 2013 file type and then click Save. So I've changed the file type to AutoCAD 2013. I'll click Save. And let's try that import again. So I'll come back to SketchUp. I'll go up to File and then Import. And once again, I have to switch it to be looking for AutoCAD files. There it is, the 2013. And then we'll go ahead and import that. Much better. So we got good results here. So obviously, that's a problem. As you move forward, when SketchUp 2019 comes out, they'll fix that problem. But it is what it is for right now. I'll go ahead and click Close. And my AutoCAD file will have come in. So there's my AutoCAD file right there. We can see that I have the topography. I have a bunch of guidelines that I created. Basically, everything came in. You'll also see over here in the Layers tray that a bunch of my layers came in as well. So it comes in as a big group. I'm going to right-click on it and click on Explode so that I have access to the individual pieces. There we go. And now I need to go through and clean things up a bit. And I'm going to use the layers extensively to help me do this process. So there's really only a few things that I'm going to ultimately keep. I'm going to keep the elevation views. And I'm going to keep the very basic floor plan. I'm going to get rid of things like the beds. I don't need those. We'll bring those in as SketchUp components later on. So cleaning things up. I could go in and I could select everything and then press Delete, for example. But it's a whole lot more efficient if I work through my layers. So first off, let me start with the kitchen layer here. I can toggle the visibility to see what is included in the kitchen layer. And it looks like I made a mistake here. when I turn on and turn off the kitchen layer, it looks like those windows are turning on and off. I don't want those windows to be deleted. So let me go ahead and select those windows. There they are. And I'm going to move them onto the walls layer. Or I could move them onto the windows layer. I probably should move them onto the windows layer. So when I do that, and I have these selected, I'm going to look at the entity info tray up here. And under layer, I'm going to change that layer to be on the windows layer. And so now when I toggle on and off the kitchen, it's not deleting those windows anymore. So I've just moved the layers. That was a mistake I made in AutoCAD. They should have been on the windows layer to begin with. OK, so the kitchen layer doesn't have anything of value on it. I'm going to go ahead and delete that layer. I will have it selected or highlighted in blue here, and I'll click the minus button, which will delete the layer. When I click on the minus button, I get this option, which means that there's stuff on the layer. What do I want to do with it? In this case, I just want to delete it. So we'll go ahead and delete it. I'll move on to the roof layer. I can toggle it, but I know there's nothing on it that is of value, and we'll go ahead and delete it and delete the contents. The furniture layer, same thing. So if I can look at the furniture layer. Yep, we can go ahead and get rid of that. I'll go ahead and delete the contents there. Windows layer. The windows are going to end up being important. I'm going to want to save those pieces. So with the Windows layer, instead, when I click on the Delete Layer button, I have a couple other options. One is to move the contents to the default layer, or the second one is to move the contents to the current layer. So if I'd like to consolidate those, I want to think about what layer I want to move them onto. Let's just move them onto the walls layer. So I'll make that the current layer by clicking the little radio button next to where it says Walls. Then I'll go back to the Windows layer and delete it, and say Move Contents to Current Layer. That will move all the windows onto the walls layer. So you see I'm kind of consolidating my way down. Next, we have layer 1. I have no idea what's on layer 1. Looks like nothing. We'll go ahead and delete that one. Layer 0 up here, somehow I missed. Looks like it's that table. We can go ahead and get rid of that one. Oops. Nope, doesn't want to let me delete that one. It must be the default layer in SketchUp. Elevations, I'm going to keep. Guides, I don't need guides. So we'll delete that one. Doors. So the doors, I already have the door openings, but I don't really need the doors themselves. So we'll go ahead and delete that layer as well. So the doors, we'll delete. Here's my furniture layer. We'll get rid of those as well. Oops, sorry. Furniture, there we go. Delete. I don't know what section cut edges is, but we can get rid of it. And I've got a bed layer, and we'll delete that as well. So I'm now down to topography, walls, elevations, and layer 0. So the topography, I probably don't need either. I'm not going to end up doing much with the topography, so I'll go ahead and delete that as well. It's really important as you go through this to think carefully about what you really need, because you don't want extra content. You want to get down to where you have the bare minimum of content. So I'm getting there. There's a few things here that I really don't want. I don't want that table, so I'll select it and press the delete key. I don't want these little pieces of counter or the sink here. Looks like there's an extra piece of topography there. So I have to go in and do a little cleanup work. There we go. Don't need the bath drain or the shower drain. Don't need that piece. Don't need that. Need that. All right, looks pretty good. Looks like I lost a little bit. I'm going to use the pencil or the line tool to fill back in a few of these pieces that I had lost, like that. Let me go ahead and delete this and delete that. I want to be where there's no surfaces. OK, perfect. So now that I have the floor plan just down to its basic floor plan, I'm going to go ahead and select the whole floor plan. I'll right-click on the floor plan and say Make Group. And by making it a group, I'm going to disconnect it from attaching to other objects. SketchUp, in its infinite wisdom, loves to glue objects together. And I can do a quick illustration to show you this. So let's say that I had a box here. And I took a box and I copied it and I made a second one. Let me just go to Copy and then Paste. Now, when I took this second box and I moved it to the first box and they touch, as soon as I go to move it again, it's glued to the previous object. The way to keep those separate would be to take this first object here, oops, make it a group, and then when you go to move it there to there, it will stay detachable. So it's just the way SketchUp works. So we're doing the same thing with the AutoCAD floor plan. We're creating something that's independent from anything that we work with later on. So I've made that a group. And I'm going to do the same thing with each of the elevations. So I'll select each elevation. I'll right-click on it and say Make Group, Make Group, Make Group. Oops, sorry, Make Group. You could make them components, but it's unnecessary for what we're trying to do. A group is just a simpler way of doing it. So now each of these views is set up as a group. And so at this point, it's time to start actually building out what's happening in my file. So I'm going to create a new layer. And this new layer I'm going to call 3D Cabin. I'll make it the current layer, and that's then what I'm going to be working on. It is, by the way, much easier to work with the AutoCAD layers and whatever, deleting things that you don't want in SketchUp than it is in AutoCAD. If you wanted to do the same process in AutoCAD, you have to do a bunch of purges, and it's more complicated. So I would encourage you to do this cleanup in SketchUp, which is obviously why I did it in SketchUp to begin with. So at this point, it's time to start creating a surface that is on our floor plan. And I'm going to do that by just tracing a line around the outside of my surface. So I'll start there, and I'll work my way around. And SketchUp has snaps enabled by default. So I can quickly come to each corner and work my way around my building. And when I get to the end right here, as soon as I click, it will make a surface. That's how SketchUp works. As soon as you've completely contained something with lines, it will create a surface for you. So that one big giant surface doesn't do a lot. I can't work with that big surface too much yet. But I can start to divide that up further. I could, for example, draw a line from here to here. And that line is then going to separate this little surface from the rest of the surface. So as I start to divide this up, I'll get more and more shapes. So I could, for example, trace over this wall. And that then separates this from the big shape. The other option here is that you could take your group at this point. You could right-click on the group, and you could explode it. When that happens, it will glue all those lines to your surface. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. I'll show it to you right now just in case it does work, but I caution you that it doesn't always work. The idea here is that when I explode it, it then embeds all the lines and should divide up that big surface into all the pieces. There's an example right there on that wall where it didn't work. So I would still have to go back in, trace over these pieces, and that would then cause this to divide up. And even that one doesn't want to divide up. So that's the risk of doing the explosions, is that you might end up with something that doesn't want to divide, as in this piece right here. And so that is just something to be aware of. Generally speaking, if you go through and you trace your objects, you're going to end up having a pretty easy time dividing them up. Okay, so now that I've divided those up and I have my walls set, I need to start extruding them. So this wall, for example, I can use the push-pull tool and I can bring that wall up. But I need to know how tall that wall is. And I could, based on my design work, just say, oh, that wall is supposed to be 12 feet, and do it at 12 feet. But our other option would be to use the elevation views to help guide us. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take each of these elevation views and I'm going to rotate them so that they're standing upright and are relating to my plan. The rotation in SketchUp is very difficult unless you have a helper object to help you rotate. So if I were trying to take this object and just rotate it, and I went to the rotate tool, I would really only be able to rotate it in this direction. I can't stand it upright. So what I'll do instead is I'll come and create a little rectangle, maybe like that. Then I'll use the push-pull tool and extrude that up a little bit. Doesn't matter how you create it, but you need a little 3D object. Now that I have that 3D object, I can select the 3D object and my elevation and go to the rotate tool. And instead of having the rotate protractor just flat in the XY plane, when I hover over the object, you can see that it changes. In this case, it's in the green plane. And I'll specify from this point, and then I want that to jump straight up. There's a point at which the little dotted line turns blue. It might be hard for you guys to see it on the projector here. It also says on blue axis. That is when it's vertical. So there it is at vertical. Right, like that. I'm going to do the same thing with these other views. When I'm done with the rotation, I can select my little box here and make that go away. I don't need it long term. So same thing here. I'm going to create another box. I'm going to use the push-pull tool, make it a little bit taller. There it is. I will select my object. I will do the rotate. This time it's going to be on the red axis. Right there. And I'll fold this one until it gets to the blue axis, right like that. And then I can delete this extra little bit. Then I'll come over to this one. Same thing. I'll create a box. Push, pull. Select all of it. Rotate. Come on. Like that. And I'll do the last one as well. Push, pull. Rotate. And there it is. So the only thing, though, is after I've made the rotations, I do have to make sure that everything falls at the right height so that my elevations aren't lower than my floor plan. I was really careful on 3 of the elevations with where I rotated from. You guys may or may not be as careful, but I know that this is the finished floor, so I know a few things need to happen. One, this finished floor plane should match up with the height of that set of stairs over here. So it should match up right there, which it does. The finished floor on this side, I don't know where this one needs to be because I don't know where the finished floor is. Here I know where it is. Here I know where it is because there's those stairs again. This one I know where it is because it's at the bottom of all these windows and the bottom of that door. But on this side I don't know. So in this case, the easiest way of doing it is I know now this is set correctly, but from here going straight across needs to match up with, I'm just going to let it go a little long here, that upper corner, which it currently doesn't. So I'll take this view, I'll use the move tool, I'm going to move it up until it snaps up to that line. And so now this line corresponds across. Same thing should be the case. This should come across and match up perfectly with that on green axis. Yep. So now I know that all of my elevations are the correct height. Since I have correct height on my elevation views, I can start to use that push-pull tool and use these as reference objects. So I'm going to come in here and I'll select this surface right here. Oh, let me get rid of that line to make this one surface. Right there, perfect. I'm going to use push-pull, and as I push-pull up, I'm going to make it match up with this in height. Now it divided up this wall into these segments based on my stairs. If I don't want those to be there, I can go through and I can delete each of those lines, and this turns into one surface. So just by getting rid of those lines, it turns into one surface. So same thing with these other. So I could take this line here. I can use my push-pull tool, and I'll pull it up. This one's a little bit taller. It's going to snap to right there. Same thing with this right there is going to snap to right here. So I'm using these elevation views as a reference. Once again, I'll have to go through and delete these extra lines because I don't need those. Like that. So I know that the top of this piece would be coming straight across and connecting with this wall. So I can draw using the line tool straight across to where it hits the face. I can draw again with the line tool straight across to where it hits the face. And I can connect that. That then makes this surface. I could delete this line there. But before I do that, I will delete it. I'm going to go ahead and push-pull this surface down by the height of the entry. So I should see it right there. There's the height. So I'll use push-pull, and this time I'm going to go down with it and make it match up right there. I have a little gap here where the door would be. I can draw a rectangle. Oops. Try that one more time. From there to sorry, I accidentally had the wrong option. There we go. I can use push-pull again. Oops. Hold on a second. I need to select that. There we go. And push that down. Oh, it's being a little bit annoying here. There we go. And in this case, it deleted part of it. So let me go back to my line tool, and we can fill that in as well. Once I have that filled in, remember I can always go back and I can delete these extra line segments like that. This object is white. This object is blue. The inside and outside have been reversed for some reason. For our purposes, it doesn't matter because we're going to do exports to Photoshop and collage work. So it kind of doesn't matter. If you're worried about it, you can select these objects, right-click, and say Reverse Faces. And it'll turn to the whitish color. So I could take all of those, for example. I could right-click and say Reverse Faces. And that would all be the white color. I can go in afterward, and I could delete this, and I could delete that. And I could delete that. And suddenly I've created that part of my entry. As I continue on, I would do push-pull on this wall here. And I would pull this up to match to right there. And now it's time to start to create these windows. So let me push-pull this up. And I could do this for each of the windows like that. Like that. Now I need to know where the top and bottom of the windows are. So I'll come back to my elevation view, and I'll draw a line from this corner along the axis until it meets there. I'll draw a line from here along the green axis until it meets right there. And now I know where the window starts and stops, so I can zoom in here. I could draw all the way across. I could draw all the way across. And actually, I could continue and draw this all the way across like that. And you can see that I'm slowly filling this all in. Now it's filled in. I have the top and the bottom on the outside. Let me draw the top and the bottom on the inside. So let me come across to there. And I'll draw across to there. 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 And like that. And so by doing that, I've essentially divided up this surface into where the windows are going to go. I need to do a little bit of cleanup, so we'll delete these lines there, and then we'll go through and delete the parts that aren't the window. So there's my first window. All right, so now I have the windows. I still need to actually create this window. So I'll keep working with the push-pull tool to work on it a bit. So before I divide it up, I'm going to use the push-pull, and I'm going to push this back in so that it has a little bit of a recess. We'll go back by maybe a ½ inch, like that. So it has just a little bit. Then I want to divide this, and I'm going to use the offset tool, which is available right here. And I'm going to start on this surface, and as I click and drag, it creates this line. I want that line to be an inch, or maybe an inch and a half, like that. And that creates that little frame for me. Then I could use push-pull again. I could push this back just a little bit more. We'll say maybe a ½ inch. And so I'm just building out that window as I go. I'll do the same thing from the back side. So I'll start with this piece. We'll push-pull. We'll push it in maybe 3 inches. We'll do the offset again. There's offset. And we could say 1.5 inches. And we'll push-pull this one again, oops, back by a ½ inch or so. And so I've essentially been able to create that little window. If I want to see this as a piece of glass, I can come over here to my materials, and I can look for, I think it's called, that's window covering, sorry, glass and mirrors. There we go. And we'll just do a translucent blue glass, and I can apply that on both sides, there and there, and that then becomes a window that I can see through. So that was creating the window from scratch. The other thing that you can choose to use is you can use something called components, which are available over here. There's a few component samplers, but you can also search the 3D warehouse. This is a bunch of pre-made objects that you're allowed to use. So if I wanted a window, I could search for a window, and I could see a bunch of different windows. Oh, that one's gone away. Let's see. OK, there's a window. If I liked that particular window, I could download it. I could load it directly into my SketchUp model, and suddenly there's a window that I can work with. So you're more than welcome to use those kinds of things, or you could create your own as you want to. Same thing applies here with furniture. So if you wanted to put a couch or something in, you could look up couch, and there'd be a bunch of couches that were available. You could click on them. Oh, I like that one. Let me download it and put it into my model. Okay? So what I want you to concentrate on today is actually building out your 3D model, which is the challenge of the day. Get your AutoCAD file in here, start to work on your extrusions, build this out as best you can. Because we're limited on time this semester, I can't give you a lot of time in class to work on this. You'll have today to work on it. Next Monday, we're going to talk about portfolios again. We're going to talk about covers for portfolios, and you'll have a day to work on your portfolio. You can also that day work on this model to get a little bit further along. Then on Wednesday, I have to double check exactly what we're going to do. It's either the elevations or the sections. Let me pull it up and just make sure that I've got it correct here. All right, on Wednesday of next week, we're going to do sections, and then the following Monday we're going to do perspectives. So we're not going to get too far in terms of we're not going to do all the elevations, the plans, the sections, and the perspectives. That's why your assignment 106 got cut out, so you don't have to do it at all. But the further along you get on this model, the more you're going to get out of the idea of cutting sections and how to collage with your sections afterward. So spend your time today wisely. Try to get as much of this done as you can. If you don't get all of the detail in, it's okay. If you just, for example, say, hey, that's a window, and you know what, I'm going to apply, yep, there's my window. That works. Is it nice to have extra detail? Absolutely. But you have to work within the time frame that you have. So even doing something as simple as, yep, that's my window, is a reasonable strategy. With this being your window, however, you still probably should divide and give yourself surfaces inside. Come on. Totally not snapping for me. Let me get rid of this rear surface there so I can see in here a little bit better. A lot of SketchUp is learning navigation and how to orbit around your view. There we go. So I just filled in that, come on, there we go. I just filled in the sills of that window. But you can see how this, with the reveals and stuff, ends up looking a little bit better than just the plain sheet of glass. But like I said, you're working within the context and the time that you have to move forward. Okay, so we've covered the basic construction, how to work within your elevation views, how to rotate your elevation views, how to get them aligned correctly, how to start extruding your walls. When it gets time for a roof, sometimes the easiest strategy is to just build it out with some large rectangles. So I could say, okay, that's now my roof. Once I have that surface in place, I can use push-pull and drop the ceiling down a little bit. Whoops, wrong button. Whatever the thickness is, like that. And then once that's put into place, you can also start to delete extra surfaces or extra lines. So I could delete this, for example, and that all joins together into one big surface that represents the roof. So it takes a little bit of time to work through, but start with the ground and build your way up. Add components, cut out your windows. Trying to think if there's anything else that I want to impart to you at this stage. I don't think so. Sometimes people want to do arcing windows or curves. Curves in SketchUp are difficult, I'll just be honest. However, you can do it. If I wanted to make one of these windows have an arcing top, I need to know where to start. So let me come down here by a foot, and then I'll drag across here. Then I'll use the circle tool, and I'll go ahead and draw the arc. And then I would get rid of these lines there, get rid of that, and suddenly I now have the arcing top of a window. So you just have to work through that. The thing about arcs in SketchUp is that they're really just lots of straight line segments. So it's not really a smooth curve. It's triangulated. So that if I did push-pull on this, and I push this back in, like that, while this reads as a smooth surface, or is supposed to, it's really just a bunch of faceted little segments. But that would be how to create an arch if you were interested in doing that. Are there any other questions, anything specific that anybody wants to know going forward? Yeah? An easy way to pan. I've always just scrolled in and scrolled out. There is a pan tool right up here at the top. I know your middle mouse, the middle mouse orbit. Shift and scroll. Oh, yeah, there you go. Thank you. Shift and middle mouse. Hold down Shift, and it will pan. Thank you for that. Truth be told, I don't model much in SketchUp. I model in Rhino, so it's just me. Okay, I will turn you guys loose. Spend your time today wisely. Get as far as you can. Yeah, question?
Yeah, I'm just having trouble getting my CAD.
Okay, I'll come and help. Any other questions for everybody? No? All right.